Hi, I'm Romesh at lawtrp, and I'm on a journey trying to figure out how lawyers and other service businesses can adapt to the modern economy. I'm sharing my experiences with you in the hopes that together we can build businesses that are better able to respond to the opportunities and challenges of our collective future. Thanks for sharing your day with me. Let's begin. So before we talk about possible solutions, it's important we establish a common understanding of the problems that we're trying to solve. The next few episodes will be devoted to establishing that understanding based on some of my own general observations during the course of my career. This episode will provide some thoughts on why the legal profession is really not designed to adapt to quick social and communal change. Let's kick off the discussion by talking about the lessons we can learn from the history of the legal profession. Now, whether you're practicing in the US, in Canada, in Asia, and Europe, our legal profession is rooted in the practices of ancient Greece and Rome. Back then, society expected individuals to plead their cases on their own behalf without the use of external assistance. Notwithstanding that law existed, for those that couldn't plead their cases on their own behalf, they started asking friends for assistance, friends being in quotes. Most of these friends were professional orators who crafted speeches for these individuals to recite in court as if it was their own. However, did you know that starting from 204 BC, it was actually forbidden for these advocates to accept a fee for their services? I sure didn't, and as a professional litigator, I found this pretty disturbing. I only found this fun fact out after I started researching the history of the legal profession for this episode of this podcast. Now, sure, the ban on fees was ignored until Emperor Claudius abolished the law about 4 or 5 centuries later. But the ban on fees was an obstacle to the formalization and regulation of the legal profession. While the ban was in place, absolutely anybody could call themselves an advocate or legal expert. The only way you knew if they were any good was based on their personal reputation. Here's some other fun facts that I discovered. It was only in the 4th century AD that advocates had to be enrolled in the bar of a court to argue before it. It was only in the 5th century that new advocates seeking admission were required to produce testimonials from their teachers. And it was only by the 6th century that a regular course of legal study lasting about 4 years was required for admission. Again, none of this I knew until I started researching for this podcast. This is obviously ancient history, pun completely intended, but the first takeaway that we can learn from how law was practiced in ancient Greece and ancient Rome is that change is inevitable. Our predecessors practiced law quite differently during this time period, and in all likelihood, the way that we practice law in the future will also be very different than what we practice today. But let's return back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome and put ourselves in the shoes of one of these orators. I'd imagine that for these orators, the evolution of their profession was barely perceptible. In fact, the most monumental changes to the legal profession in ancient Greece and ancient Rome occurred over centuries. Now, keep in mind that the average lifespan of an ancient Greek or an ancient Roman was about 40 to 60 years, which means that the changes that were occurring extended beyond their lifespans. Compare that to the legal profession of today. Technology has transformed our legal practices. Legal research is now conducted online. I, for instance, do not go to a law library to conduct research. Meetings can be conducted via audio conference, if not video conference. I file documents in court online, or I try to anyway. As a result of technology, the changes in how we practice law are measured in years, if not months, certainly not decades. None of this is really surprising. The speed of change in our profession is only a reflection of the speed of change in our broader society. In fact, I think it's a little bit slower than the speed of change in modern society. Which leads to the second takeaway. The speed of change in today's economy and our social and political and communal contexts is faster than at any other point in history. Again, this shouldn't really be breaking news. But there's a third lesson that can be learned from studying the history of our legal profession. Our legal profession, our governing bodies, and frankly, our legal system is dictated by tradition and precedent. Once we graduate law school, we learn how to practice law from our exposure to other lawyers. We learn how to conduct the business of law from our exposure to other lawyers. Our governing bodies are informed by and influenced by the business traditions and practices of those that came before us. We argue cases based on principles distilled from our predecessors. We always trust in the wisdom and decision making of those who came before us. In short, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. The author and philosopher G.K. Chesterton once said, "Tradition means giving votes to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors. It is the democracy of the dead. Tradition refuses to submit to that arrogant oligarchy who merely happens to be walking around." And I value tradition. There's tremendous value in learning from and integrating the knowledge and history of those that came before us. But our emphasis on tradition in our legal profession also means that our profession is simply not designed to adapt to rapid communal and social changes. We value tradition and precedent at the expense of adapting to the future. Lawyers are creatures of habit, so used to our habits that we really don't function well without them. And in a society full of rapid changes, like a society what we're in now, there is a danger that our emphasis on our habits and our tradition and precedent, we become prisoners of those habits, falsely assuming that tomorrow's legal practice will look the same as the past. And as the ancient Greeks and ancient Romans have shown us, from studying the history of our profession, we know that is not true. Let me illustrate this point with a practical example. We know that technology will be part of tomorrow's legal and business reality. However, one's ability to integrate technology into their legal practice is really capped by that person's individual to use technology. If that person does not know how to integrate technology into their practice and they don't know how to use the technology in their practice, you're really not well equipped with the tools necessary and the knowledge necessary to participate in a discussion about what the future of law looks like. So here's the third takeaway. Don't expect older generations of practitioners to have all the answers on what the future of business and the future of law looks like. Obviously, there may be some exceptions, but generally speaking, one's perception of the future of legal practice is colored by the way one has practiced law in the past and their ability or intention and willingness to adapt and change their practice, to evolve their practice for the needs of the future. If you're not a lawyer, don't assume these lessons only apply to lawyers and other legal professionals. If you run any business, and in particular a service business, I firmly believe that these takeaways apply to you. So to summarize, 1, change is inevitable. 2, change in today's society, business environment, and legal profession is quicker and more rapid than at any other point in history. And 3, one's ability to adapt to quick and rapid change is influenced and informed by the way you have practiced law and practiced business in the past, your ability to use technology and understand how technology can benefit your practice, and 3, your willingness to adapt your business and your practice for the future. There are obviously more. I'll get to those lessons later on in the series. Look, if you want to avoid being the prisoner of the traditions, practices, and habits of our predecessors, and you're interested in learning more about the questions that sparked my own journey to find a more modern way to practice law and conduct business, join the law entrepreneurship community. You'll get the 10 questions I asked myself before I started this journey, which you can then use to inform the growth of your own career and the goals of your business. The law entrepreneurship community will be your first step to accessing exclusive content that supplements each episode of the Law Entrepreneurship Briefing. It's also your opportunity to influence future episodes of the podcast. Join the community by going to bilaw.link/pod. The link is also in the show notes. Talk to you next week. Cheers.